Baldur's Gate 3 has created a new phenomenon in the gaming industry. It's not just an excellent game, but it's also one of the rare cases where the world of D&D is truly brought to life in a video game. Something many players thought was impossible after the failure in terms of revenue of Pillars of Eternity 2. And at the center of the world that Swen and his team at Larian have created are the Mind Flayers of race. That is the essential theme of this Baldur's Gate game. So now let's join FG Mania in today's story, everything about the Mind Flayers in the vast world of the Forgotten Realms. Mind Flayers are strange, evil, and terrifying creatures possessing incredibly powerful psychic abilities. As of now in the world of D&D, they often lurk deep within the Underdark, where they seek to expand their territory and enslave other races they find. They are known for their habit of consuming the brains of their unfortunate victims. They often appear in gaunt and frail forms, at least until their tentacles begin to emerge, and when you lose control of your body, that's when the true nightmare begins. So what specific abilities do they possess? Every Mind Flayer uses telepathic communication, allowing them to converse in any language with other creatures. This ability also enables them to infiltrate the minds of other creatures, allowing them to control and dominate the minds of their victims, often grimlocks, orcs, or sometimes humans. Furthermore, one of their most feared abilities, often talked about in roadside taverns, is the Mind Blast, an ability that shatters the minds of their foes. It's their favorite attack because of its convenience. A psychic wave with a range of about 60 feet can render anyone, even the mightiest warriors, completely paralyzed and an easy prey. Many high-level Mind Flayers even have the ability to control objects from a distance or alter the memories and personalities of a victim at will. Encountering one or more Mind Flayers is almost a death sentence for an adventuring party. Not because they are godlike beings who can obliterate everything, but because they are powerful creatures with intelligence that can outmatch nearly all others. Moreover, one thing is certain: death is the most merciful thing they can bestow upon their victims. As many know, the Mind Flayers' diet consists of the brains of other creatures, primarily those of humans, as only brain matter provides the necessary combination. 3 essential components for sustaining the physiology of a Mind Flayer: hormones, enzymes, and psychic energy. They can consume other types of food, most of which contain the required enzymes and hormones, with internal organs being preferred on the menu. To stay healthy, a Mind Flayer needs to consume at least 1 brain per month, in addition to the necessary nutrients, memories, or more accurately, the souls of victims are also absorbed and shared among many other Mind Flayers in the community. In theory, if you're devoured by a Mind Flayer, your soul won't go to heaven or hell, but will be forever imprisoned within the collective consciousness of this malevolent species. Continually consuming the memories of various victims also contributes to shaping individual personalities. For specific Mind Flayer individuals, this helps them develop distinct personalities compared to their peers. This explains why some of having preferences for music, aesthetics, or decor. Moreover, their brain eating is not always out of necessity, but simply because they derive pleasure from sensing the pain of their victims during the process, sometimes finding it even more enjoyable than a good meal, as the more sensitive and frightened the victim, the finer the feast. This is also the answer to why they prefer freshly captured victims over their own thralls, or why they particularly enjoy weaker spellcasters over mighty warriors in many cases. Aside from consuming or keeping thralls, they serve another crucial purpose for their prey: reproduction. Especially, although all Mind Flayers lack a specific gender, they will spawn eggs once or twice in their lifetime. Tadpoles are born from these eggs and are kept in a hatchery. They cannibalize each other for about 10 years. Survivors are implanted into the brains of humanoid creatures, thus creating a new Mind Flayer through a process known as seromorphosis. Seromorphosis typically takes around 7 days, with common symptoms including: Day 1, fever and temporary loss of memory. Day 2, hallucinations, and a gradual change in skin color. Day 3, hair begins to fall out, blood oozes from eyes, mouth, and nose. Day 4, excruciating pain as organs and bones transform. Day 5, total erasure of the host's personality. Day 6, mouth tears open to make way for the tentacles. And on the final day, a new mind, Flayer, is born. In reality, this process can be completely reversed if a skilled healer is encountered within the first 3 days. But most aren't so lucky. In many cases, attempting to remove the tadpole from the host leads to the most agonizing death possible. Furthermore, this 7-day process can sometimes be shortened to a few hours or even seconds with the right catalyst. Newly born mind flayers will have little to no memory of their former selves, but some may retain habits or traits of their previous victims. They often perceive themselves as superior beings, tyrants driven by the ambition to dominate, and the highest form of evolution of narcissism. If someone were to ask what they desire most, any of them would answer with world domination, or better yet, dominion over the entire world, be it material, heaven, or hell. But there's something amusing in the minds of these mind flayers. They don't perceive themselves as evil. Contrarily, they view their own kind as representatives of order, with the sole purpose of existence being to bring ultimate order to a chaotic universe, with all other species being potential slaves, lost existences with no purpose until they're discovered. But because of this, they are exceedingly arrogant and consider themselves superior to any other species. Apart from them, all others are merely livestock with 3 primary roles: food, thralls, and breeding tools. They even consider consuming another creature's brain as a gift they are bestowing upon that individual. Moreover, in terms of emotions, contrary to the general perception of them, mind flayers are a highly emotional species. More than 90% of the emotions they can sense are negative. For instance, they can feel anger when provoked, but conversely, they can hardly feel joy. For mind flayers, there are 2 concepts that are closest to happiness, that those are enjoying the suffering of others when they consume their brains in the feeling of domination. In practical terms, the need to dominate other species is not just a goal or ambition for them, it's something they genuinely require to survive. It's similar to the orcs in Warhammer 40k needing war to thrive. If they don't dominate someone, they themselves become desperate, even going insane. In some cases, they may even feel sadness and loneliness when their thralls die for any reason. Sometimes individual or groups of mind flayers are willing to abandon all their ambitions and plans to seek new thralls to free themselves from this feeling. Because after all the cruelty and ruthlessness they possess, loneliness is what they fear most. So, is there such a thing as a good mind flayer? The answer is definitely no, because from any perspective, mind flayers are a species close to pure evil. If you want to find a good mind flayer, it's probably easier to go to hell and find a kind demon. Because the very least in the D&D world, demons, despite being evil, SC enough, always respect the contracts they sign. Mind flayers are 100% evil if they exist within their community. Only a very rare few individuals can separate themselves and be considered neutral. Speaking of good, they simply do not exist. Regarding their community, you will never see a mind flayer alone. Instead, they are often accompanied by 2 or more of their thralls on personal missions. Furthermore, these mind flayers usually live in a large community they call a colony with tens of thousands of members. It sounds big, but the actual number of mind flayers in it is only from several hundred to 1 or 2,000. The rest of the population is usually filled with thralls. Yes, the number of mind flayers is not really high compared to the number of thralls they possess. Because of this, every time a slave uprising occurs, the consequences are often extremely horrific. Even the mind flayer race itself was nearly wiped out twice in the past due to such events, which I'll explain later. Another extremely interesting thing about mind flayer communities is that even though they are a highly individualistic species with a very high sense of self, they themselves in the community are also a form of thrall. Specifically, a mind flayer community is operated by an elder brain, a form of hive mind created by the consciousness and brains of deceased mind flayers in the community. An elder brain has absolute authority over any individual within a radius of about 5 miles, helping the mind flayer colony to develop in a unified and efficient manner. Additionally, the elder brain is a tool for sharing a common knowledge of all mind flayers within the colony, like a combination of a library and a Facebook chat group. Basically, they use it for communication among themselves. For example, if one mind flayer in the colony senses you, it's the same as hundreds of others nearby doing so as well. But even in the presence of the elder brain, mind flayers themselves are still individuals who need to dominate others to survive and possess an almost unlimited ego. This leads to constant power struggles for control of territory or simply ownership of thralls. They can go so far as to establish political factions within their colonies with beliefs and actions almost completely opposite to each other. In simpler terms, it's like having Democratic and Republican factions. The influence of these political factions sometimes extends to human territories in forms such as cults, worshipping mind flayers as gods, recruiting thralls, and adding more manpower to their original colony. Of course, there are still some cases where mind flayers attempt to escape from the community they inhabit, or more accurately, escape the control of the elder brain, and there have been a few rare cases among them that succeeded. Such mind flayers are considered rebels, heretics, and are hunted down by their own kind. Rebel individuals develop their own personalities, preferences, and memories during their travels around the world. The range of their personalities often varies from extremely evil to neutral. Sometimes they even cooperate with other species, including humans, to ensure their own survival. There are cases where they adopt the worship of a certain deity for a period of time. But what happens if an individual who has separated themselves is captured and brought back to the community? Specifically, all the unique personalities, preferences, or memories they acquired during their journey will be completely erased by the elder brain, turning them back into just another mind flayer. That's pretty much all the information you need to know about this mind flayer race. Before we dive into Baldur's Gate 3, there's one last thing we want to discuss: their origin. So where did they come from? As an incredibly ancient species, they even existed before the gods in this world, at least before history could be recorded. In fact, mind flayers themselves aren't entirely sure of their true origins. This is quite strange because they possess something called eternal memory. Some scholars hypothesize that mind flayers are creatures from a distant future who have traveled back in time to prevent the extinction caused by their own universe, which is heading towards its end. They sent their fleet to various points in history to reestablish their empire. At one point, mind flayers were the most powerful race in both the physical and spiritual worlds, with a timeless empire. In the Planet Primal novel, it's asserted that the mighty mind flayer empire even threatened the boundaries of the outer planes and transcended numerous worlds of countless other deities. However, later on, Gith, the most prominent slave race of the mind flayers, revolted, ultimately destroying the entire mind flayer empire in less than a year. The mind flayer race was pushed to the brink of extinction during that time, and they faced persecution nearly everywhere they traveled. The only reason they still exist today is that within the Gith community at that time, constant civil wars erupted over power. This created an opportunity for some mind flayers to escape. Sometime after the Gith uprising, the surviving faction of mind flayers migrated to a refuge deep beneath the surface of the planet Glyph and established the city of Rito. They began to assault the dwarven cities, initiating a conflict that lasted over 20 years. It ended with the mind flayers withdrawing. However, this didn't mean they were defeated, just that they had what they needed. More specifically, they had managed to capture and enslave a significant portion of the dwarf population at the time. Unfortunate victims they captured were turned into cattle, subjected to countless cruel experiments over the centuries. From this, a subrace of dwarves called Dorgar emerged. The seeds of rebellion sown, this race also eventually rose up, almost turning Arito into dust. After these events, this faction created a few strongholds in the northern Underdark and became one of the most influential species in the Underdark. By the way, this race is also featured in Baldur's Gate 3. Due to endless wars, the Mind Flayer race weakened significantly. They even lost the knowledge of how to create nautiloid ships, indirectly cutting them off from returning to the universe once and for all. Nevertheless, despite all this, they remain one of the major antagonistic forces, a classic presence, and an essential part of the D&D world. And that's my video about this species. What do you think of them? Please leave a comment below, so we know. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye. See you next time.